My name is Meredith Sterling. I never thought I would be sharing this story. Even now, my hands tremble as I type these words, remembering that life-changing day when I crossed the threshold between life and death, what I witnessed, what he showed me. It wasn't anything like what I'd been led to believe all my life, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. It was December 14th, 2023. I remember the date clearly because it was supposed to be a special day, my daughter's college graduation. Instead, it became the day I died for 7 minutes and 23 seconds. The morning started normally enough. I was running late as usual, rushing to get ready for the ceremony. The roads were icy that morning in Minneapolis, but I barely noticed. My mind preoccupied with making sure I had my camera charged and ready to capture every moment of my baby girl's big day. I never saw the truck coming. They told me later that the semi had jackknifed on the highway, creating a chain reaction that involved 5 vehicles, including my small Honda Civic. But I don't remember any of that. What I do remember is the sudden weightlessness, like being underwater, and then darkness. But the darkness didn't last. The first thing I noticed was the absence of pain. Just moments before, I had been trapped in the twisted metal of my car, every breath an agony. Now I felt lighter than air. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in my car anymore. I wasn't on the highway. I wasn't even in Minneapolis. I found myself standing in what I can only describe as a vast expanse of nothing and everything at once. It was like being inside a pearl, iridescent, shifting colors that somehow weren't colors at all. The air, if you could call it that, seemed to pulse with life and energy. That's when I heard the voice. Meredith. Just my name, spoken with such love and tenderness that it brought tears to my eyes. I turned around, and there he was. Everything I thought I knew about Jesus Christ's appearance, everything I'd seen in paintings, movies, and church windows, shattered in that moment. The being before me was both familiar and utterly foreign, both human and clearly divine. His skin was not the pale white of European paintings, nor was it the dark brown that some scholars suggest. It was a rich, warm olive tone, sun-kissed and weathered like someone who had spent countless hours under the Mediterranean sun. But more striking than the color was the way his skin seemed to emanate light from within, as if each cell of his being was a tiny star. His face. Oh, his face. How can I describe it? It was perfectly symmetrical, yet utterly human. His features were strong and defined, clearly Middle Eastern in origin, with high cheekbones and a strong, straight nose. His beard was full but neatly trimmed, black with hints of brown, not the flowing light brown beard we so often see in paintings. But it was his eyes that captured me completely. They were a deep, rich brown, almost black, but with flecks of gold that seemed to dance like stars in a night sky. These weren't the blue eyes of Warner Sallman's famous Head of Christ painting that hung in my grandmother's living room. These eyes held the wisdom of millennia, the pain of all humanity's suffering, and a love so profound it brought me to my knees. "My child," he spoke again, and his voice seemed to resonate through every particle of my being. "You have questions." I did have questions, thousands of them. But in his presence, only one seemed to matter. "Lord," I managed to whisper, "why do we get your image so wrong?" He smiled then, and it was like watching the sun rise over the ocean. "You see what you expect to see," he said, taking a step closer. "Your ancestors painted me in their own image, seeking to make me familiar, to bring me closer to their understanding. But I am all peoples, all nations, all tribes. The color of my skin matters far less than the love in my heart." As he spoke, his appearance seemed to shift subtly, like watching ripples on water. For brief moments, I saw him as different ethnicities: African, Asian, European, indigenous, but always with that same underlying divine radiance, that same profound love in his eyes. But, I began, struggling to understand, the historical you, the Jesus who walked in Galilee, looked much like my brothers and sisters who still walk those lands today, he finished for me. I was born to a Jewish family in ancient Palestine, Meredith. My skin was darkened by the sun, my hands calloused from work. I was not the pristine figure you see in church windows. He held out his hands to me then, and I saw them. Strong, workers' hands, marked with the scars of his crucifixion, but also bearing the marks of a life lived in manual labor. These were the hands that had shaped wood in Joseph's carpenter shop, that had broken bread to feed thousands, that had healed the sick and raised the dead. Watch, he said softly, and suddenly we were standing in ancient Jerusalem. The streets were dusty and narrow, nothing like the sanitized versions I'd seen in biblical films. The people hurrying past wore simple, practical clothing in earth tones, their skin various shades of brown and olive. The air was thick with the smell of spices, animals, and humanity. And then I saw him, the historical Jesus, walking through the crowd. He was shorter than I'd imagined, probably around 5 feet 5 inches, with the muscular build of someone who worked with his hands. His skin was weathered from sun and wind, his hair and beard black and curly. He wore simple, humble clothing, indistinguishable from those around him, except for the way people reacted to his presence. This is how I appeared to those who knew me then. His voice came from beside me, though he was also there in the crowd before us. A man of my time and place. Nothing in my appearance to draw attention. It was not my physical form that made me extraordinary. The scene shifted, and we were back in the pearl-like space. But why show me this? I asked. Why is it important? His expression grew serious. Because my children have too often used my image as a weapon, claiming I look like them and not like others. They have used it to justify hatred, conquest, and oppression. But I came for all people, Meredith. All people. As he spoke these words, I saw visions of the damage done in his name. Crusades, colonization, slavery, discrimination. All justified by a false image of a white European Jesus. The weight of this truth felt crushing. Then why haven't you shown people the truth before? I asked. He smiled sadly. I have. Many have seen me as I truly am, but humans often see what they want to see, hear what they want to hear. Some who have glimpsed my true appearance have been dismissed as crazy or heretical. Others have kept silent, fearing rejection or ridicule. Should I tell them? I asked, suddenly nervous about sharing this revelation. Yes, he said firmly. But remember, the most important truth is not the color of my skin or the features of my face. The most important truth is this: I love all my children equally and unconditionally. My appearance changes nothing about my message or my sacrifice. He stepped closer then, and I felt an overwhelming wave of love wash over me. Your world is torn by division, my child. People fight over differences in appearance, culture, beliefs. They forget that I came to break down these barriers, not build them up. When you return, tell them what you've seen. But more importantly, tell them what you've felt. When I return, I asked, suddenly remembering that this wasn't my permanent state. Am I going back? Yes, Meredith. Your time has not yet come. You have a purpose to fulfill, sharing this truth with others. But remember? He placed his hand on my shoulder, and warmth spread through my entire being. Focus on the message of love and unity. My true appearance is important only insofar as it helps break down the barriers humans have built between themselves. I had so many more questions, but I could feel a pulling sensation, like a gentle but insistent tide drawing me back. "Wait," I called out. "I'm not ready." "You are," he smiled. "And I am always with you, no matter what face you see when you picture me." The next thing I knew, I was gasping for air, surrounded by medical equipment and concerned faces. The doctors later told me I had been clinically dead for 7 minutes and 23 seconds. They called it a miracle that I had no brain damage, no lasting physical effects. But I was changed, profoundly and permanently changed. In the months since my experience, I've struggled with how to share what I saw. How do you describe the indescribable? How do you convince people that everything they think they know about Jesus' appearance might be wrong? How do you tell them that it both matters tremendously and doesn't matter at all? I've learned to start with the simple truth. Jesus didn't look like the paintings. He didn't have blue eyes or light brown hair. He wasn't European. He was a Middle Eastern man of his time and place, with dark features and sun-darkened skin. But I've also learned to quickly follow that with the more important truth. His physical appearance is far less important than his message of universal love and acceptance. Some people accept my story readily. Others dismiss it as a hallucination or near-death confusion. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And I know why I was sent back. The truth about Jesus' appearance isn't just about historical accuracy. It's about breaking down the barriers we've built between ourselves. It's about recognizing that divinity doesn't belong to any one race or ethnicity. It's about understanding that when we make God in our own image, we limit both God and ourselves. Since my experience, I've noticed something interesting. When I close my eyes to pray now, I don't see any particular image of Jesus. Instead, I feel his presence, that all-encompassing love that transcends physical appearance. Sometimes I catch glimpses of him in the faces of strangers. All sorts of faces, all colors, all features. And I understand now that this is exactly as it should be. I've also noticed changes in how I interact with others. When you've seen the divine in every shade of human skin, it becomes impossible to harbor prejudice. When you've felt the love of Christ in its pure, unconditional form, it becomes impossible to accept discrimination or hatred in his name. My near-death experience lasted just over 7 minutes by earthly standards. But in those 7 minutes, I learned truths that some spend lifetimes seeking. I learned that Jesus' physical appearance was both simpler and more complex than we imagine. Simpler because he looked like a man of his time and place, more complex because his divine nature transcends any single physical form. But most importantly, I learned that focusing too much on his physical appearance misses the point entirely. Jesus didn't come to establish what God looks like. He came to show us how to love like God loves. As I share my story, I often get asked if seeing Jesus' true appearance changed my faith. The answer is yes, but not in the way people might expect. My faith didn't diminish because Jesus looked different from the paintings. It grew stronger because I understood that his message of love and inclusion was even more revolutionary than I'd realized. To those who might struggle with this revelation, I offer the same words he spoke to me. The color of my skin matters far less than the love in my heart. If we could truly embrace this truth, how might our world change? If we could see past our preconceptions and prejudices to the divine love that exists in every human being, how might our communities transform? I don't have all the answers. My experience, profound as it was, didn't grant me complete understanding of all divine mysteries. But it did give me a mission: to share what I saw and felt, to help break down the barriers we've built between ourselves, and to remind people that God's love transcends all human categories and divisions. As I write these words, I'm acutely aware that some will question my experience or dismiss it entirely. That's okay. I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. I'm here to share my truth, to tell my story, and to pass on the message that was given to me. Love transcends appearance. Divine truth exceeds our human understanding. And Jesus, whatever he looked like, came for everyone. The accident that nearly claimed my life gave me a gift beyond measure, a glimpse of divine truth and a purpose to share it. Every day since then has been a bonus, an opportunity to spread this message of love and inclusion. When I look in the mirror now, I see my scars from the accident, but they no longer remind me of trauma. Instead, they remind me of the incredible journey I took, the truths I learned, and the love I felt in those 7 minutes and 23 seconds when I crossed the threshold between life and death. And to anyone reading this who might be struggling with questions about faith, appearance, or belonging, I want to share one final truth from my experience. You are loved, completely and unconditionally, not because of how you look or what you believe, but simply because you exist. That's the message Jesus wanted me to share, not just what he looked like, but what his love feels like. This is my story. This is my truth. And I share it with the hope that it might help us all see beyond appearances to the divine love that connects us all.